Any politician who seeks to avoid the taxes they owe in this country is not fit to be in charge of taxpayer money.
Deputy Prime Minister, you've been accused of dodging a £40,000 tax bill on your new home on the South Coast.
There is additional tax owing on this.
Every pound of tax that's not delivered to the Chancellor and to the Exchequer means that it damages our public services.
There is additional.
The ticking time bomb, Angela Rayner's explosive legacy. Before we dive into this political powder keg that's about to reshape Britain as we know it, make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors. Because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next in British politics. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because this story is just the beginning of what promises to be the most turbulent period in Labour's modern history. Angela Rayner has left Westminster, but she's left behind something far more dangerous than her fiery rhetoric or her confrontational style. She's left a ticking time bomb beneath the very foundations of British employment law, and when it explodes, it won't just be Keir Starmer picking up the pieces. It'll be every business owner, every job seeker, and every working person in this country. The Deputy Prime Minister's dramatic exit following that rather convenient stamp duty arrangement on her £800,000 Hove seafront property might have given Starmer a moment of quiet satisfaction. After all, Rayner was never quite his cup of tea, was she? Too working class, too authentic, too willing to say what the Labour grassroots actually thought rather than what focus groups suggested they should think. But her departure has handed Starmer a poisoned chalice that could destroy not just his government, but the entire British economy. You see, while everyone was distracted by the soap opera of Rayner's resignation, her employment rights bill continued its relentless march through Parliament. And this isn't just any piece of legislation. This is a union's revenge fantasy made manifest, their long-awaited payback for decades in political wilderness since Thatcher broke their stranglehold on British industry. If you think I'm being dramatic, consider this, and do subscribe if you haven't already, because we're about to unpack one of the most consequential political stories of our time. Rayner's bill doesn't just tinker around the edges of employment law. It fundamentally rewrites the relationship between employer and employee, handing workers full employment rights from day one. No probationary periods, no trial runs, no opportunity for businesses to assess whether a new hire is actually capable of doing the job they've been hired for. Now, before the usual suspects start crying about worker exploitation, let's be brutally honest about what this actually means in practice. Imagine you're a small business owner. Perhaps you run a local cafe, a building firm, or a tech startup. Under Rayner's brave new world, you hire someone on Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon, if they decide they don't fancy showing up for the rest of the week, you're stuck with them. Full employment protection, full rights, full legal headaches if you try to do anything about it. The employment lawyers are already sharpening their pencils, aren't they? Because this isn't just about giving workers a fair deal. It's about creating a legal minefield that only the biggest corporations with their armies of HR specialists and legal teams can navigate safely. Small businesses, the backbone of the British economy, are about to find themselves playing a game where the rules have been written by people who've never had to make a payroll or explain to a bank manager why this month's profits are down. And here's where it gets really interesting. Make sure you're subscribed because this analysis goes deeper than anything you'll hear from the mainstream media. Youth unemployment is already climbing at an alarming rate. We're looking at a generation of young people who are struggling to get that crucial first foot on the employment ladder. Now imagine you're an employer faced with hiring a 22-year-old graduate with no work experience. Under the old system, you might take a punt, give them a 3-month probationary period, see how they get on, help them learn the ropes. Under Rayner's system, that same hire becomes a massive risk. What if they can't handle pressure? What if they are chronically late? What if they simply don't have the work ethic you need? Too bad. You're committed to them with full employment rights from minute one. The cruel irony is that this legislation, designed to protect the vulnerable, will actually make employers far less likely to take risks on vulnerable candidates. Someone with a patchy employment history due to mental health struggles? Someone trying to get back into work after a period of unemployment? Someone from a disadvantaged background without a gleaming CV? These are precisely the people who will find it even harder to get opportunities, because employers won't be willing to take the risk when there's no safety net. But wait, there's more to this story, and if you're not already subscribed to UK Connors, you really should be, because we're tracking every twist and turn of this unfolding disaster. The timing couldn't be worse. We're already seeing artificial intelligence tearing through traditional graduate entry-level jobs. The very positions that once provided young people with their first taste of professional work are disappearing faster than you can say ChatGPT. And now, just as employers are becoming more cautious about hiring humans instead of algorithms, Rayner's bill makes hiring humans significantly more risky and expensive. Rachel Reeves and Starmer have already declared war on British business with their eye-watering £25 billion national insurance raid. The early estimates suggest this tax grab has already killed 174,000 jobs, with another 100,000 hanging in the balance before Christmas even arrives. Unemployment has jumped from 4.3% to 4.7% since the budget, and we're heading toward 5% faster than a Tory MP heading toward the nearest lobbying opportunity. Into this economic carnage, Rayner's employment time bomb is about to detonate. It's like setting off fireworks in a powder magazine. The secondary explosions could bring down the entire structure. Now, here's where the political chess game gets really fascinating, and do subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the curve on these developments. Some Westminster insiders whisper that Starmer might use Rayner's departure as cover to water down the worst excesses of her bill. After all, with his troublesome deputy out of the picture, perhaps he can finally govern like the sensible, centrist technocrat Starmer has massively underestimated the forces he's dealing with. The trade unions didn't fund Labour's path to power just to see their prized legislation watered down by a man they never fully trusted anyway. They've been waiting 4 to 4 years for this moment. 4 to 4 years since Margaret Thatcher systematically dismantled their power base and consigned them to the political wilderness. This isn't just about employment rights for them. It's about restoring their role as kingmakers in British politics. The unions know something that Starmer seems to have forgotten. They made him, and they can break him. Without their funding, their organizational muscle, their ability to get Labour voters to the polls, Starmer would still be a backbench MP filing earnest amendments to obscure pieces of legislation. They didn't invest in his leadership campaign and bankroll his party just to watch him triangulate away their biggest policy win in decades. And here's a delicious political irony that makes this story so compelling. Subscribe now if you want more analysis like this. Rayner, for all her working-class authenticity and union credentials, was actually the perfect lightning rod for business opposition to these employment reforms. Business leaders could focus their anger on her, paint her as a radical firebrand pushing through dangerous legislation, while Starmer played the reasonable statesman trying to keep her in check. Now she's gone. There's nowhere for Starmer to hide. This is his legislation now, his responsibility, his potential economic catastrophe. If the employment rights bill crashes the economy and creates mass unemployment, it won't be Angela Rayner who gets the blame. She'll be safely ensconced in her Hove apartment, probably writing her memoirs about how the establishment conspired against the working class. It'll be Sir Keir Starmer, the sensible lawyer, the safe pair of hands, who carries the can for economic vandalism on a scale that would make even Gordon Brown blush. The business community is already mobilizing. They've moved beyond polite letters to the Financial Times and concerned presentations to select committees. They are talking about investment strikes, about moving operations overseas, about the fundamental uncompetitiveness of the British economy under these new rules. When major employers start making those kinds of noises, governments traditionally listen. But this government seems determined to stick its fingers in its ears and hum the red flag. The international implications are staggering too, and make sure you're subscribed because we'll be covering every angle of this story as it develops. At a time when Britain is desperately trying to attract foreign investment post-Brexit, when we're competing with more flexible, business-friendly economies across the globe, Rayner's legacy legislation is essentially putting up a giant neon sign saying close for business. Why would a multinational corporation establish its European headquarters in Britain when it could choose Ireland, the Netherlands, or any number of countries with more sensible employment laws? The technology sector is particularly vulnerable. These are companies built on agility, on the ability to scale up and down rapidly, on taking chances on brilliant but unconventional talent. Rayner's bill turns every hiring decision into a potential legal quagmire. It's like trying to run a Formula One race while dragging a caravan behind you. Technically possible, but hardly optimal for performance. And let's talk about the small business sector, the entrepreneurial spirit that's supposed to drive British economic recovery. How many potential business owners are going to look at these employment laws and decide it's simply not worth the risk? How many brilliant startup ideas will never see the light of day because the regulatory burden makes employment too dangerous? We're not just talking about killing existing jobs. We're talking about strangling future job creation in its crib. The regional implications are equally stark. London financial sector might have the resources and expertise to navigate these new employment laws. But what about the manufacturing businesses in the Midlands, the service companies in the North, the creative industry scattered across Britain's cities and towns? Many of these businesses operate on thin margins and tight timescales. They can't afford teams of employment lawyers or lengthy HR processes. They need the flexibility to respond quickly to market changes, to take chances on people, to build teams organically. But here's perhaps the most damaging aspect of this entire fiasco, and do subscribe because this insight goes to the heart of what's wrong with modern British politics. This legislation represents everything that's broken about the relationship between the political class and the people they claim to represent. It's been drafted by people who've never run a business, never had to make difficult decisions about hiring and firing, never had to explain to their staff that there's no money for pay rises because the latest regulatory burden has eaten into the company's margins. The trade union leaders pushing for these changes draw salaries that would make many small business owners weep with envy, while claiming to represent the interest of ordinary workers. The Labour MPs voting for this legislation have never had to choose between hiring someone new or keeping the lights on. They live in a Westminster bubble where employment means a parliamentary salary, generous expenses, and a pension that most private sector workers can only dream of. Meanwhile, the real-world consequences of their ideological fantasies will be borne by the very people they claim to champion. The young person who can't get their first job because employers are too scared to take a risk. The skilled worker who loses their position because their company relocates to a country with more sensible employment laws. The entrepreneur whose brilliant idea never gets off the ground because the regulatory burden is too overwhelming. This is what makes Angela Rayner's departure so significant, and why you need to stay subscribed to UK Connors for the full political fallout. She was the authentic voice of working-class Britain in a Labour Party increasingly dominated by middle-class professionals. She understood, perhaps better than any of her colleagues, that employment isn't just about rights, it's about opportunities. It's about giving people the chance to prove themselves, to build careers, to create better lives for their families. Her replacement as Deputy Prime Minister, whoever that turns out to be, will inherit a poisoned chalice. They'll be expected to defend legislation that could destroy the very employment opportunities they claim to be protecting, while navigating the political minefield of union expectations and economic reality. The Conservative Party, still reeling from their historic defeat, must be watching this unfold with something approaching glee. They don't need to do anything. Labour is destroying its own economic credibility with surgical precision. Every business that relocates, every job that disappears, every young person who can't find work will be a reminder of what happens when ideological purity meets economic reality. And Keir Starmer finds himself in an impossible position. He can't water down the legislation without facing a union revolt that could destroy his leadership. He can't proceed with it unchanged without facing an economic catastrophe that could destroy his government. It's a political checkmate that would be fascinating to watch if the consequences weren't so serious for millions of British workers. The international observers are already taking notes. How long before other European governments start quietly briefing foreign investors about the advantages of locating anywhere but Britain? How long before British-style employment laws becomes a synonym for economic self-sabotage in boardrooms from Frankfurt to Singapore? This is Angela Rayner's true legacy, not her working-class origins or her authentic political voice, but a ticking time bomb that threatens to blow up everything Labour claims to stand for. Employment rights that destroy employment opportunities. Worker protection that makes workers unemployable. Economic justice that creates economic devastation. The timer is counting down, and every day brings us closer to the explosion. Starmer knows it. Reeves knows it. Every sensible person in government knows it. But they're trapped by their own rhetoric, their union masters, and their ideological blindness to the real-world consequences of their political fantasies. The question isn't whether Rayner's time bomb will explode. It's how much damage it will do when it does, and whether there will be anything left of the British economy to rebuild afterward. Make sure you're subscribed to UK Connors because this story is far from over. We'll be tracking every development, every job loss, every business closure, every political twist and turn as this economic catastrophe unfolds. The mainstream media won't tell you the full story, but we will. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and prepare for the most dramatic political and economic upheaval Britain has seen in a generation. Because when Angela Rayner's time bomb finally explodes, you'll want to be watching from the front row. Safely subscribe to the channel that saw it coming.